Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery. There are sections of my wormery where I can barely fit underneath the vent ductwork, but luckily I do fit. If I was maybe another inch taller, I'd be skimming these vents. And it's kind of nice because it is winter time and there's no heat down here in my basement, so luckily I'm able to be down here on certain days with just short sleeve t-shirt. And I hope that it's warm enough for my African nightcrawlers, because the African nightcrawlers are pretty sensitive to cold, and those are the types of worms we're going to be checking in on today. They're the worms that live right here in my newest systems, and these systems are only 4 days old today, but the reason I wanted to come back and check in on them today because, well, I deployed the worms into bedding only, and I do want to make sure that they're well fed, and I'd like to provide them with some grit as well. So we're just going to be checking in, see how they're doing on day 4. And, well, you know, as long as we're on the topic, really quick, the systems that those worms were removed from are still sitting here with straggler worms living in them. And at some point, I would like to try to arrange the roundup of those stragglers. But for now, I thought I would just allow for a little bit of foraging. Allow mainly, not so much foraging, but drying. Allow the material to dry out a little bit more so that at some point when I do set up baiting stations, the worms will be pretty motivated to move out. So that's just a quick little recap of where things stand with these African nightcrawlers. So let's get up on the bench with those new systems and get them fed. When I was migrating the worms out of their old environments, I had used the horizontal migration method, which means I just, set up a baiting station or more of a feeding zone on the edge of the bin, and then over the course of 20 days the worms gradually made their way over there, or at least what appeared to me like it was the majority of the worms had made their way over there. Oh my goodness, what's going on here? On a couple occasions I've gone back to those systems over there. What on earth is happening here? Alright, well, on a couple occasions I went back to those two systems over there in order to till the material a little bit and to spin it around, kind of stir it around to aid in the drying of it. But I didn't really take any time to peek under the plastic to see how things are doing in here. And I don't understand what's going on. I mean, I simply deployed the worms as I normally do, but it does almost seem like these poor worms are in some way averse to the material that they've been placed into. They're just huddling together, and usually when you see worms huddling together in this fashion, my goodness, it typically means that they're getting into this defensive posture because they're not comfortable in the material that they're inhabiting. My goodness, I don't know what to do. I mean, I'm not going to just throw them back into their old castings. I mean, they've been in here for 4 days now. I'd really like to think that they're, going to be able to live comfortably and thrive in these 2 new bins. I mean, the material in these 2 new bins was set up to sort of prime and sit around for probably more than 2.5 months. So the material was sitting around and sort of soaking with leaves and cardboard and moisture. And I had even attempted to inoculate the bedding that these little guys got moved into by placing some of the worm castings that these little guys were living in into the freshly made bedding material. So I don't know what's happening here. This stinks. This is not what I normally find. I wonder, could it be perhaps not so much the bedding that they're not digging, but the temperature? I mean, it does look promising over here to a certain point that they've pretty quickly retreated down into the bedding after I spread them out on the surface. But I keep bumping into large globs of little worms everywhere. Gosh. I'm almost wondering if just an overall stir of the material might help them get sort of spread out. And see here too, they all seem like they just managed to dive down into the bedding, but I just feel like if we keep probing beneath the surface, we're going to keep bumping into little pockets of worms huddling together. I mean, I did put a good amount of moisture into here, so the material at the very bottom is glistening with moisture. That doesn't seem to be the issue. Oh my goodness, down here too, look. These little worms, I don't mind when I get to the very bottom of the material and I find worms taking advantage of the collected moisture that's down low. That is kind of what I expect the worms to be doing sometimes, because I did kind of simply pour fluid into here. So forgive me while I kind of try to triage the situation here and assess what's happening and hopefully come up with a remedy for whatever it is that's ailing these little guys. I mean, at this point I would like to think that the material has become such that they're comfortable enough to be in it. Huddling together due to the cold, I don't know if there's much I could do other than possibly relocate the bins to be somewhere other than right beneath the window, which is a somewhat drafty window, I'll admit. I'm wondering if we're going to find similar huddling down low within these. Yeah, look at that. And at this point it's hard to say whether it's already huddles of worms that were there before, or are these the worms that we just disturbed earlier and they had simply cruised down low and found themselves and created a huddle? Maybe not, I'm not sure. I think the ones that I'm pulling up from down low or that are sort of huddled together are ones that had been down there already. These are probably not the ones that we tried to spread out across the top surface. Alright, well, I'm going to take my chances here and simply stir the material around and try to sort of separate worms that are huddling together in the hopes that they don't really feel the need to be in that mode anymore, and hopefully they'll just sort of get acclimated to the material that they're in and start behaving a little bit more normally, which is to just be individual creatures cruising around on their own accord and not feeling the need to jumble together like this. Alrighty, well, that's about all I could do, I think. I'm not sure what else I could possibly do to help these little guys, so why don't we just proceed to giving them their feeding today. So I had these pieces of leftover coffee filter from when we hauled the horizontal migration feeding zones out, and then I've got these soiled pieces of napkin. I typically dig a trench into my worm bins when I feed and drop the food down low, but my idea was to do sort of a surface feeding. I've been doing surface feedings in a few of my systems, and it kind of gave me the feeling like the results were actually pretty good. I think banana peels, so banana peels is part of what's on the menu today, were what I observed as something that did seem to go really quick in the matter of only about 10 or 11 days in a couple systems where I had top-fed banana peels. So I thought that perhaps this first feeding that they get today would be administered in a way that is also following that top feeding approach. But I had some soiled napkins too that needed to be dispensed with. So I thought that perhaps this can be like the little placemat onto which we put the food for them. So why don't we drape this stuff out across the top surface. I've still got those top coverings of newspaper that we encountered when we first got in here. And just wondering if we've evenly distributed the paper here. Not that it really makes much difference. Why don't we leave it at that? And then we'll just use these as sort of top coatings or top coverings, because I like to sometimes deploy feeding zone indicators into my worm bins, and those coffee filters are already torn in half, or at least one of them was, and that's the reason I just followed suit with the other one and tore that one in half too. So this third banana peel here, it's got a couple chunks of actual banana stuck within it. So this system here is actually going to gain the benefit of a little bit of yummy banana, not just the peels and stems. So I am wondering if by feeding on the surface, if we're going to get good results like I observed in another couple systems. Here I actually started eating this roll here and only figured it out at the very end when I was about to cut off another slice of it, make a little mini sandwich, a little mini ham sandwich. I saw this mold on here and then I ceased and desisted from eating that roll, but whatever. I guess I consumed a little penicillin in the process. Because that's what you get when you just sort of leave some rolls out in a Ziploc bag on the counter for a number of days. I usually keep bread in the refrigerator because I don't know how long it's going to be till the opportunity presents itself for me to prepare myself a sandwich. But in this case, the roll just sort of sat there on the shelf, on the countertop, I mean, for perhaps a little bit too long. And some mold spores must have already been on the bread and started developing there. So I got to eat a little bit of what the worms like to eat, which is mold. Worms love mold. They'll eat this stuff right up, but from a human's perspective, I'm not sure if it's the best thing for you. I'm not too concerned. I'm sure my body will break it down just like any other foods. These little worms starting to crawl the sides here. I do like the fact that I don't have lids for my containers because the sides of my containers have dry walls, which typically gives most adventurous worms that want to climb a good sense of what they're in for if they keep going, which is just more dryness. So I do find that is a fairly decent deterrent that keeps worms from attempting to exit their environments or even crawl the sides of the bin usually. And I did observe a good bit of similar activity when I deployed the worms into these bins. They were cruising all over the top surface, kind of refusing to dive down, so perhaps that was already some of the writing on the wall telling me that these worms were not happy. So I don't know, we're just going to hope for the best here, and maybe I won't wait too long between now and the next check-in. So this is worm chow. It's mainly just leaves. Usually I don't include too many leaves in my worm chow, but this time I did include quite a bit, and it's in large part also pumpkin seed, all ground into a nice fine consistency. The other stuff that I tapped out here a moment ago was just pulverized eggshell. That's the grit that they're getting. So last but not least, we're going to use these couple of coffee filters to indicate where we last fed. Not that we'd have such a tough time finding it later. I do it mainly because it's sort of a little tradition down here in my worm bin. So I think we're almost at the finish line here. We're just going to return these top covering pieces of newspaper, and then back on goes the plastic covers. And I really hope that the worms are not going to freak out again. I do believe I'm going to simply leave them out here on my bench with the lights on overhead and hope that they just stay put within their bins and eventually settle down. So keeping my fingers crossed. Alright everyone, that's it for the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always very much appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. Alright everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.